it was indeed the dawn of a new moment in our electoral process, in our democracy here in the country. We're leaving most of that process hanging in the balance. Welcome. It's Nigeria 2015 this morning, and voting continues in most parts of the country where they had issues yesterday. I'm Sulaiman Alede.
Good morning, I'm Maupe Ogun.
Good morning, I'm Nelta Egbe.
Well, the drawback took most Nigerians by surprise as the poll became inconclusive in most parts. People voting into the night, getting to see how much of torchlights we can have from our mobile phones. And the fun part is that Nigerians truly, as the president advised and the APC candidate advised, patience. We saw loads of patience yesterday. And of course, we persevered. And the thing is that today, coming to work, you could see loads and loads of traffic, people, traffic building up, unlike yesterday where there was no movement. But again, the thing about this particular election is that we have accepted our faults. We have accepted that so many things can be done better, and we're moving forward. Against all odds, INEC, as an umpire, is saying we must forge ahead, and the people are saying we are with you, irrespective as we have a permanent voter card.
Yesterday, for me, what shocked me yesterday was the desire of Nigerians evident. I mean, it was so strong. You could see them under the rain, under the sun. Everybody was determined. I mean, someone just sent a mail, said he voted at 10 p.m. And at 11:30 p.m., just about when some people were going home, that's when some polling officials were gathering their bags to go home. In some other location, it was up to midnight. But that, as you said, that desire to see a moving forward was evident across board. Some people had to turn on their headlights, just so that, we talked about touchlights, someone turned on their headlights just so that there will be enough light to see the voting process come through. It's amazing.
Sulaiman, yesterday after we left the studio, what I went to do, on my way home, I decided to go around a couple of neighborhoods to see just what was happening in those areas and how they had fared. Just around us here in Channels Television, we have a rather big polling unit. I think they had close to 500 voters yesterday. As at the last count, they had 450 people counted. So what was happening was that in some polling units where the INEC officials came late, for instance, if they came in at 12 and people had been waiting for a very long time, what they decided to do in those polling units was to take numbers. So they all took tally numbers. They had a rough idea of how many people were going to vote on that day. They waited again for another 3 hours or so before they could get the approval for manual voting, because it would seem like the card readers had packed up. So they waited till about 3, and then that was when the accreditation, the manual accreditation process began. But if you listen to the individual stories of the people in that particular polling unit who made that process happen, you would know that Nigerians had the zeal to ensure that these elections, come what may, happens in their polling units. As long as the INEC officials were there, they were willing to give them whatever support they needed to ensure that the process was free, was fair, was credible and acceptable by them all. So it was amazing to watch. It wasn't just the one at Channels TV. I went all the way to Okwebi, around Ikeja, Magodo area. People were voting into the night. INEC officials didn't show up on time. When they eventually did, it was a while before card readers worked. When they eventually worked, it took forever and ever. So all of these dynamics, however, proved something. As at 8 p.m. when I finally got into my house, voting was just starting in some polling units just around my area. So I was wondering, are people this patient? Because there were crowds, but there was a crowd around that area. And I don't know, one would have thought that people would be too disappointed in INEC and say, I'm going home, I can't stick this. And some people did go home, but majority of people waited behind. I think it's a testament to the faith of Nigerians in this democracy. And I think that at the end of the day, we should praise them. For the past couple of days, I have been monitoring what they call the voter turnout in previous elections, 1979. I cannot wait to see just what the voter turnout will be in spite of the hitches we experienced with permanent voter card collection, and what turned out, what percentage of that 81.9% turned out to eventually cast their ballot, and what percentage was eventually able to. Because what you must note, because of the accreditation and voting process, is that you will find a lot of people turning out perhaps for the accreditation, but not that same number going back to vote.
Well, I think basically the big question that loads and loads of people have been asking, this particular extension, will it usher in a new dawn? Is it a case of Jega accepting what has occurred and expanding the frontiers to the extent that, well, the bottom line is for INEC telling everyone, as long as you have your permanent voter card and you have any kind of issue with your card reader, then you should be allowed to vote. And that is what we've seen in so many parts of the country. Mark, but the interesting thing here is that in some states, from start to finish, they had a fantastic ride with the card reader. So what comes to mind now, questions as to, well, expertise as to, you know, the operation of this particular device, as well as maybe a particular batch being sent to some other areas. But the bottom line here is that politicians, they have actually been complaining, but the good thing is that almost everyone across board, all political parties, we have seen a fantastic moment with them in respective of how much they have told their followers and members, as well as those who would want to cast their ballot on their behalf, that look, let's keep the peace, let's keep the you know, temper the tension to the extent that we have a fantastic election. But as it is now, we have the observers, we have the monitors, local and international. They're still very much around. And I'm hoping that pretty much later on the program, we'll be speaking with them, asking them questions as to what exactly happened in where they're observing or monitoring this particular election. But it is the 2015 election. 2 elections Nigeria had yesterday, the National Assembly and the presidential elections. And of course, the big news you must have heard is that election continues in places where they had a couple of issues. We'll take you over to the papers because the big headlines, of course, you would definitely see them screaming headlines online. Yes, real media, that is the traditional media. Well, what you take home is what you take home.
Well, Sulaiman, just yesterday, you know, someone was asking me, and a lot of people were asking on social media. It was a buzz yesterday. We were receiving a deluge.
I just don't want to talk about it.
We were receiving a deluge of mails, tweets. You just name it, pictures, what have you.
Never in the life of me have I seen that amount in my inbox, and it's reading over 1,000 on Radar. Oh my God, where do you want me to start?
You know what I did? I just selected all at once and marked as red because I was tired. No, you don't understand. So like as you're reading, they do make meaning
after the elections.
But you see, as you said, never in the life of me have I seen that amount of mails in my inbox unread. So I marked all as read, then took my time to begin. By the time I took my time to begin to read one after the other, and the ones I could reply, I replied.
I tell you what, I slept on.
Because we have to thank Nigerians.
Slept on my mails.
We have to thank Nigerians because it meant that people were following the process.
Absolutely.
They wanted their voices heard, and the ones that we could really, because we couldn't take everybody, we had to take some, and you know, some of these things are time bound. So for instance, somebody has reported in the morning that polling officers are yet to arrive. It's 11 o'clock here. I've not seen anyone. By the time it's 1 o'clock and you're about to take that, you find out that the situation could have changed in those areas. So those dynamics, sometimes we cannot get your message out as soon as you want it to. So we apologize, but we ask you to stay with us. Keep them coming in because we will take your pictures, we will take your mails, we will take your tweets, and we appreciate all that you've sent to us. But what I was saying is that one of the questions that people were asking is whether or not movement was going to be restricted today. And I think the answer to that is already obvious, because if you go out, no one is restricting anyone from moving. There will be movement today. The question then was, what was INEC trying to achieve when it said that majority or there should be no movement yesterday? If voting continues into today, wouldn't that, whatever it was we're trying to prevent with preventing movement yesterday, wouldn't it happen today?
Well, anyway,
I think that's one question that we'll definitely pose to INEC.
But it's a different scenario because it's a national election. It's a general election across the country. But now we're talking about pockets of other, you know, so it's not across board. So movement is allowed, but when it's a general election, definitely you have to put a stop to that.
It was the answer I gave to one of the persons who physically asked me that question. But then I don't know how satisfactory it is, because we do not know. In some places, in some states, if you ask me, in many places there were hardly elections in many areas. So how is it that INEC has been able to identify those areas? Have they been able to identify everywhere that did not get polling agents yesterday? And how widespread is it? Do you have, for instance, in a particular local government where nothing happened, would you say that people can move in that local government? You know, these are questions that people will want answers to, and we hope that INEC is getting ready to answer those questions.
I think those are really questions that we must bring before INEC, Marco, because it's quite interesting here. If there are places where voting didn't take place at all, and maybe if they hadn't done their accreditation, if they can start the process of accreditation again today afresh, and do the actual voting. But you know the good thing here, what I see, Marco, when you started asking the question about movement, I think that Nigeria is moving towards an era where elections will be held on weekdays. Now, we're talking about, you recall that we have people who are known as the Sabbatarians who wouldn't want to do anything on a Saturday. They've always complained that, look, it is their belief, their religious obligation does not ask them to do any of such on a Saturday. Perhaps pretty much later, as we move as a nation, we'll inculcate some of their tradition and see where we can be doing elections the way they do it in other climes. You can do it on a big Tuesday, on a Monday, on a Wednesday, because as it is now, we have some Christians who will be going to church, but some will prefer,
Sunday today.
some will prefer to exercise the civic responsibility. So these are the sacrifices we're talking about coming from the people, coming from Nigerians. But basically, we're getting somewhere knowing full well that a time will come where we'll be having elections maybe on a Monday, on a Tuesday. I can still go to work. I come back to the office. I smile and look at Malcolm and say, well, I just cast my ballot. And so it is going to be. But again, as we move forward, we'll be looking at the papers. We did say the headlines are big and huge and screaming, and some of them can actually jump out of the papers. What do you find? We'll start off with the Vanguard this morning and see what the Vanguard has on its front page. And I'd like to see that pop up on your screen so that we can actually do something. Yes, there you have it.